Come on now. All right. Are we have any classes tonight? No classes? Oh, okay. All right. Exodus chapter number 20. We got about halfway through, and what we'll probably end up doing is getting recapping a little bit on the first 11 verses and then going through the rest of this chapter and possibly getting into chapter 21. I don't know. In chapter 20, you have the law of God, or to kind of alliterate the chapter, we'll call it the commands. And then chapter 21 is the consequences if you break those commands. And it kind of goes into more depth because when you look at these, it's all literally, except for two, it's thou shalt not or thou shalt have. Most of it is just straightforward, but there's two that are kind of proactive in their teaching. Verse number 8, it says, remember the Sabbath day. And then verse number 12 says, honor thy father and mother. The only two that really break away from just thou shalt not, thou shalt have no other gods before me. So as you look at these, and what we talked about last time was the first four commands are really the commands that God puts on the person to say, hey, this is your relationship with me. So he gives four for God to man, or really man to God, and then the fifth command is honor thy father and thy mother in verse 12, and that is a bridge command. You say, what does that mean? Really, I used to break them down. The first four was our relationship to God, and then the next six was our relationship to man. But the Jews actually break them down. The first five is relationship to God. And you say, how in the world can you make honor thy father and thy mother about your relationship to God? Well, where do you as a child hear about the Lord? That is the intention of what the Lord is trying to get across as He's broken down the Sabbath day there in verse 8. He said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now I know in Colossians chapter 3, Jesus fulfilled the Sabbath. He is our Sabbath. But in verse 9, it's 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. We ought to take a rest and think about what the Lord has done for us. But the seventh day, verse 10, is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all them in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it, or made it holy. Verse 12 is where we stopped at last time, but he simply says this, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now the Apostle Paul in, I believe it's Ephesians chapter 4, he says, this is the first commandment with promise. So what is the promise? Well, that your days will be long on earth as long as you honor thy father and thy mother. As you look at that, I see a couple different things. It doesn't say love thy father and thy mother. It says honor. We may not always agree with our moms and our dads, but we have to respect. We have to really show reverence, not so much to the person, but the position. It's the same thing as, we ought to show reverence. We ought to show respect to the presidency. If you didn't vote for Donald Trump, or if you voted, whoever you voted for, we ought to, according to Romans chapter 13, we ought to respect the higher power, show reverence to that office, and that is an office of authority, such as the position of father and mother. And I say this. Honor simply means to respect, to value, because, moms and dads, they're the ones who pay the bills. They're the ones who teach you about the Lord. They're the ones who take care of you. If you have a need, they come in, and at least they're supposed to. That's not always the case, but and I think that sometimes, and I think it's in the book of Leviticus. Somebody may find that, but it actually reverses these two, and it says to honor thy mother and thy father. So what does that mean? Here's the thing: the Bible, when it starts listing things, it's generally in priority as number one. So it would be like us, like, of course, to God, the first commandment is the one that if you'll follow that, if you can follow the first one, you can follow the other 9. Wouldn't you agree? So the first one is high priority, right? The 10th one is not as high priority. Now, here's the thing. We can't keep those. But if we can keep the first one, we can keep the 10th one. So God is saying, listen, do this first. And he says, honor thy father and thy mother. And I think that as time has went on, especially when you get into the next chapter, there has been this battle for many years. It was women's rights. And I think that women ought to be able to vote, and I think that women ought to be able to do the things that the Bible allows them to do. But I don't think that women should take the position of men, and I don't think men should take the position of women. If God says, here's the thing, pastors and deacons, no women. But he gives to Paul. Paul tells Timothy, he says, listen, but there are qualifications for deacons' wives. So I think that they ought to meet those criteria. But as you look at this, he says, honor thy father and thy mother. He's saying these two, the father and the mother, are, one's not above the other. They're both equally parenting children. So you ought to respect both. And when you respect both, when you're doing what the Lord would have you to do, but it says in the promise to you doing this is that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Now, what does that mean? There's a lot of speculation on what that actually means. So if I just respect my parents, then I'm just going to live a long life. That's actually not what it is teaching. It's really talking generational, because God is so... He sees so much further down the pipeline than we do. He's saying, as generational goes, that when you teach your children these things, your children will teach their children these things. And really, He's already addressed that back in verse number 5. He says, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, talking about the graven images that people have carved. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me. What is God saying? He's saying, look, as you get further down into the 3rd and 4th generations, why do they hate me? Why do they not appreciate me? Why do they not look to me and say, that's my God? Because you all have failed in the God is right. The first 4. If I can get my relationship right in the first 4, at least do the very best that I can. And I can do the 5th one. That hinges me to really bridges me across from God to my parents teaching me about God. Now I know how I should treat other people. I shouldn't steal. Or let's go to verse number 13. Thou shalt not kill. You know what's interesting about that is people even in other religions know that killing is wrong unless they've been brainwashed. Like the Quran does. So, and here's the thing. What was it you sent me the other day about a verse out of the Quran? It said that he was the greatest of deceivers, that Muhammad was the greatest of deceivers. Here's the thing about the Muslim extremists. The Quran teaches them to lie. It teaches them, as long as you can get in there and lie to get yourself into a position, if you're doing it for this cause, then it's okay. That's what their religion teaches them. Well, our religion teaches us to lie not, bear not false witness. Now, that goes on into many other things, but, we're told not to kill, not to murder. And then he's going to expound upon that in chapter 21. See, these are all just commands. We honestly, should we even need a chapter 21? So there you go. I mean, if that is true, if that's what, I don't know what the Quran says. I don't even know if that's a book in the Quran. I have no clue. But if that's what it says, you rest your case. But it says, thou shalt not kill. So you don't have to be convicted of murder to know that it's wrong, right? At least I hope you don't. But verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. So thou shalt not, as a married person, go out and seek to have a sexual relationship with somebody else. As you being married, don't go out and commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. These things we know. It's interesting. You don't have to tell a child at the store, don't take a candy bar. They already inherently know that it's wrong. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that's why chapter 21 is so important, because it starts to break these down, and that's the important. And here's what's so interesting. When you get into chapter 21, people always use that eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and they have no idea what the context is of that. The context is if a woman that is pregnant and two men get into an altercation and something happens, that a child is maimed in the womb, or if she is thrown into labor early and she has this child because of the stress of the situation or what the turnout of the situation, the law says eye for an eye. If something happened to the child and the eye's messed up, the guy that caused it is gonna get the eye taken out. That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about just going rogue and eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and all that stuff, because that's not the context of the whole deal. And that's picking and choosing. But yes, it is actually in the context of thou shalt not kill, it is thou shalt not murder. And then he breaks those down into chapter 21 about premeditated, or if it's circumstances out of your control. And it's kind of interesting how it puts it in chapter 21. But anybody else? You see, these are so really elementary to us. I mean, do we really need to have somebody this is why people don't generally preach out of the Ten Commandments, is because they're like, yeah, we know that already. I shouldn't kill somebody. But do people really know that? Sometimes people really need to be told. What was it, a few years back, that preacher in Burnside had gunned that person down in Danville at the pawn shop over some money, and then went back to preaching like 2 weeks later, and then finally got caught. It's just insane. But thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. Now, stealing can be a few different things. If I was to get up here and I was to, I don't take Charles Spurgeon's quote or A.W. Tozer's quote, and I was to say, I'm the one who said that. That's also theft, because I didn't say that. Somebody else said that. But also stealing is, whatever it is, thou shalt not steal. Do not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. That is a... in these, when I was going through and I was reading these, I'm thinking about John chapter number 19, where Jesus is going through these mock courts, and all these commandments are just being thrown out the window. It's like the people that were doing this knew more about the Ten. I mean, they could literally quote the Ten Commandments to you. I could probably quote most of them, but I probably wouldn't quote them in order. But they would know. I mean, they would know these things, and they're breaking them left and right. It's amazing that how did they not get this? They were bearing false witness. They were killing. They were really coveting that Jesus would die. Now in the covet here it says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's." Interesting. That is the one that Paul dealt with the most. When he would present himself, people looked at Paul and they was like, "Man, that guy's got the law." He said, touching the law, he said, "I'm blameless." He said, and what he means by that is people could look at me and they could say, "Man, look at Paul. Wow, I mean, Pharisee the Pharisee. How does Paul do it?" And Paul said, "This is the one that slew me." And you say, why did that one slew me? Why did it slew Paul? That's the one that deals with the heart. Thou shalt not kill, that's an act. Thou shalt not commit adultery, that's an act. Thou shalt not steal, that's an act. Bear false witness, covet thy neighbor. But as you look at those are all acts that are plainly saying, "Yeah, I seen him steal. Yeah, I seen him kill. Yeah, I heard he committed adultery." But how does anybody know if you're coveting somebody's stuff? They don't. Unless you're like, this guy gets a new truck and you're like, well, I guess I just have to go and buy one just like he's got. But you want other people's things. Not just the house, but everything that's in the house. Even nor his ox, nor his ass or his donkey, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. I mean, you got to be careful. There's some cool stuff out there. Would you agree with me on that? And it seems like the neighbors have got the cool stuff and you never have the cool stuff. Right? You see a new water hose. I don't know about you, but listen, me and water hoses have had a time over the past 6 months. But you think about that. I tried to buy one at Walmart and I was like, "Oh no, we're not allowed to sell that." There was a recall and I'm like, how in the world do you not sell it to me? But they wouldn't sell it to me. So that is all the commandments. And that is the one that Paul dealt with the most. And so what did Paul tell the Philippian church? The opposite of covetousness is to be content. He said, "Where I'll be abased where I'm abased, I will abound where I'm abound." Either way, I have to be content with what God's given me. Does anybody have anything to there? We may not. I don't know how far we'll get tonight, but. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Where would that fall?
Yeah.
Church.
Yeah.
I the our group.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. 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 Some people just can't be happy with they got to try to make other people miserable. They just can't be content, and it's crazy. There's a lot of drama in churches.
everybody
Mm-hmm.
feels
Yeah.
and puts an elevation there against sin.
Mm-hmm.
God doesn't get that like that fly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
condition application.
Yeah. I heard this about bearing false witness. It's, when you go to a court of law and you stick your hand on the Bible and they say, repeat after me, want what is it? The whole truth, nothing but the truth. Yeah, the truth. So we may know the truth, but we may not tell all of it, right? And that's not telling the truth. If you just because it was sound bites. Anybody can take a sound bite of what somebody's saying and apply it to their narrative. It's happening all the time on mainstream media. Yeah. 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 You take a sound bite of something. I mean, I could, and some people will just take it and completely butcher it. And what was it? You had seen a picture on a sign at a Mexican restaurant one time, and somebody had wrote on there, money is the root of all evil. And I was like, I remember her writing that, and I was like, no. And she goes, I know, that's what I was sitting there looking at. Like, that's not what it says. But people that don't look at the Bible, they're just like, wow, yeah, I mean, money, that's the devil. No, money's not the devil. The devil's the devil. But, that's just, you take a little bit of a soundbite and you try to fit it to your narrative. It's not that hard to make things, make things say the way that you want them to be said. So there's the truth, the whole truth. We may not tell all of it. Yeah, it's a full lie. And we may tell the whole truth, but then we may go past that. Right? I caught a stringer full of whales down there at the creek. No, I fished that creek. I know what's in there, and they're not whales. But he may have caught a stringer full. But the whales part was adding on. And I think that is what God is trying to get across when you get into the book of Revelation. And he says, if you change, take away, or add anything to the book of this prophecy, that is literally, you're not handling the Word of God the way that it needs to be handled. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You got to continue to go. I mean, what is this everlasting life? What if I don't get everlasting life? What do I get? Well, it says you're already condemned because you believe not. You gotta. I heard it one time. Guy went through John chapter 3 and then got to verse 16, and he was like, this is the title of the message, the truth behind John 3:16 is the entire story. And now some people are even starting to say that Jesus didn't say, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. They're saying that John had put that in there, but I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. And really doesn't matter. It's true. So I don't know. All right. So the commands have been given, and the people have heard this. It says in verse 18, and all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die. So what just took place here? Well, as a matter of fact, that is really exactly what happened whenever the law was given. This is the standard by which you cannot reach. So, just like a leper, they had to go afar off. It's just how it was. It scared them to death. They were scared already back in the last chapter, but it scared them whenever they heard God's voice. And I think that would be Isaiah as well, and when he seen the Lord high and lifted up in this throne, he said, I am undone. He said, I see myself for who I am. And they said, hey, Moses, here's the thing. You speak with us and you do the intercessory thing. We don't want God speaking to us anymore because we will die. And this is... It's interesting but that's what they said. Look at verse number 20. And Moses said unto the people, fear not, for God has come to prove you. He's come to test you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that you sin not. God didn't come so that you can be like, oh, we're all condemned and we're going to die. No, God wants you to live a holy life. This is the purpose of it. But notice that, and even in 3 verses, it said, or in 4 verses, 18 through 21, it says 3 times that they stood afar off. They stood afar off. They stood afar off. And he says there in verse 21, and the people stood far off, and Moses drew near unto the thick darkness where God was. And the Lord said unto Moses, thus thou shalt say unto the children of Israel, ye have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Ye shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall you make unto you gods of gold. How many days after this were they breaking that? 40. Remember, Moses comes down and they're down there. Oh, Aaron's like, it was magic. That calf just popped out of the fire. When you read that in Exodus, I think it's Exodus chapter 32, Aaron's just like, poof, it just, I don't know. We went through and plucked bracelets and earrings out of people's ears, and that just came out of the fire. I don't know how that happened. It's like, Aaron, are you kidding me? You made this. You guys made this. And it was a whole lot more in depth. They were dancing. They were provocatively and no clothing. And it was not a good situation. But God says, isn't it amazing that God says, don't do this because I know you're going to do it. It's kind of like when you tell your kids when they go outside, don't take your gloves off. It's cold outside because you know they're going to do it. That one there is the world's worst for taking jackets off. It's like 15 degrees outside, and then now the basset hounds are dragging the jacket around. And it's like, what in the world's going on? Shoes, shoe will be over there and then one over there. I'm like, why is that shoe out there? I don't know, I can't find the other. Well, it's probably on the other end of the yard. It's kids. Love them to death. But God says in verse 24, now he's going to give some stipulations to this. He says, I want an altar. He says, an altar of earth thou shalt make unto me, and shalt sacrifice thereon thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings. thy sheep and thine oxen in all places where I record my name. I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And if thou wilt make an altar of stone, thou shalt not build of it hewn stone, for if thou lift up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. Neither shalt thou go up by steps unto mine altar, that thy nakedness be not discovered thereon. What is God saying? God's saying, look, here's the thing. I don't want you to build an altar with your own hands that you can look back and say, look at what we did. You know, we took and do you remember when we cut them stones and set them perfectly in place? God says, I don't want that. This is what I want. I want it simple. I want it sacred, because when the priest goes up, he said, I don't want the back of his flesh to show. God was serious about this. This was a reverent place. And also he's instituting, he's saying, look, he said, you've not done this yet, but there's going to be burnt offerings and peace offerings. He said, this is going to be the sacrificial system. He said, you know, I'm going to set this up. But he doesn't ask for a temple or a tabernacle here. He says, just build me an altar and worship me at this altar. But do it the way that I have told you to do it. And at the end of verse 24, I will bless thee. Anybody got anything? There, we got about 15 minutes left. Maybe we'll get into a few verses here in the next chapter. Because this is, the next chapter is really, some people look at it and they're like, wow, God is not fair, but that is not what this is teaching at all. It's some crazy stuff, though. I'm going to put it to you like that, because we look at slavery and these things that are happening in this chapter, totally different than what God is talking about here. So if I was to say the word slavery, what do we automatically think? What? You think of Black Lives Matter? I think of something way more 100 years ago. But this is what I think of, you know, the North and the South, the Civil War. And that is not biblical slavery. What took place here is not at all. You kind of have to take your brain and rewire it to what God's version of servanthood or slavery would be, because when you see here in the second verse, a Hebrew servant, it's literally talking about a Hebrew slave. So he says, now these are the judgments which thou shall set before them. And so in chapter 18, Jethro's like, Moses, you are bombarded with this stuff. You can't do all this, because they were coming to Moses, and Moses was talking to the Lord, and the Lord was talking to Moses saying, this is how you handle this situation. Now it is set in stone. It is, yeah, that's a pun. Now it's set in stone. This is how, this is how it should be done. This is how it should be handled. That way, Moses, you can take this and you can give it to this judge, and this judge can go back to his area and say, okay, this is what God says. He is the ultimate judge. He is the ultimate ruler. It says there in verse 2, if thou buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years he shall serve, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. So a Hebrew servant, why would you buy a Hebrew servant? Well, a few different reasons. One, maybe somebody is indebted to you. Yeah, maybe they I don't know, maybe they burned your barn down or something, just whatever. But now it's like, well, I don't have the money to fix that. Okay, well, you can be indentured to me for 6 years. And on the 7th year, I'll let you go. But this is the work that you'll have. They weren't supposed to be, not treated like, well, you are beneath me. And Jesus really explains that really well in the New Testament and then Paul also explains it very well. Masters should take care of their servants, and servants take care of your masters. It ought to be a two-way street. You could, if just say you got into a financial situation and you're like, I just don't have any money. You could literally go and say, I'm going to sell myself to you for 6 years. I don't know. Right.
Why does it go free?
Yeah.
Work, fix,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
and you have
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a lot to all that, tying the calendar in. Yeah. But as you look, you work the 6 years, and then the 7th you go free. You could be, and I don't have a means of taking care of myself. So this person would say, okay, you come work for me. I'll give you shelter. I'll give you food. I'll give you, finances. But it's pretty interesting how this starts to break down here just in the first 6 verses. But he says you can go out for nothing, and there's a few more instances to why you would become either a servant or B, a master. But in verse 3 he says, if he came in by himself, so if the servant comes in and he's all by himself, he shall go out by himself. So if he comes in, he's going to leave the same way he come in. If he were married, then his wife shall go out with him. So whatever possessions that he brought with him, they would leave with him. Now, it takes a little bit of a turn here. Verse 4, if his master have given him a wife, and we look at that and we think, well, this is really odd. It wouldn't be very odd in their culture because, they didn't have, the coffee shop and the dating apps and all this stuff, and they didn't go around. It was literally, marriages were arranged a lot of the times. So if his master have given him a wife, and here's the thing, the servant doesn't have to accept this. Okay? It's not like, oh, you have to do this, I'm your master. No, he doesn't have to accept this. And that's going to play a role into what the rest of this verse says. If his master have given him a wife and she have borne him sons or daughters. So he is now involved in this relationship. He's got children with this woman. The wife and her children shall be her masters, and he shall go out by himself. So if at year 7, he's like, okay, I'm leaving. Okay, I'm out of here. Well, she and the kids have been my financial responsibility. You've not taken care of them. They are my property. That sounds like a very terrible term to use, but literally, you've not given a dowry. You've not paid for them. So they are mine to keep. Now, here's the thing. Why would the guy leave? He shouldn't have to. He should either A, pay the dowry, or B, I'm not going anywhere. And that's what the next verse says. Verse 5, and if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife and my children, I will not go out free. Now this is, man, we talk about gauged earrings today. This is the business right here. Verse 6, then his master shall bring him unto the judges. He shall also bring him to the door or unto the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. Wow. So literally, the guy would take his ear, put it up against the door of the doorpost, and they would put it all there and then whack it with a hammer. Where do they come up with this stuff? I don't know, that's just what they did. But I will say this. Go to Psalm 40 and verse 6. You ever read those verses where it's like the opening of my ears? Is it because my ears have been shut? No, because you haven't had an awl whacked through them yet. And listen, this is not a 10-year-old girl going to the mall and getting her ears pierced. This is brutal. Verse number 6, sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire. Now this is David talking to the Lord. Though you didn't ask for those, you didn't desire those things, but mine ears hast thou opened. And mine ears hast thou opened, burnt offering and sin offering hast thou not required. What is David saying? David's saying, God, you wanted me. And that's the whole picture that's going on here in the book of Exodus. Is literally he doesn't want the dowry. I want you. That's what I want. I want you to stay. I want you to. You've been in a good relational situation. You've got a good master. You've got a good wife. You got good kids. But this is the thing I am getting at. I want you, and that is the Lord. Verse number 7. Wait, yeah, we got 5 minutes. Maybe a few more here. Verse number 7. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, here we go again. Let me read the rest of this verse and then I'll stop. And if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So, again, when you take the Bible and you handle it without reading forward, stop it. You just read one verse and you don't continue on, or you take a little bit of a verse and you just... There's a common thing that's going on, that's been going on for quite a while. A preacher will read a verse and then everybody in the congregation will close their Bibles. That is insanity to me. Or they just don't bring one. That's pretty common. Oh, you don't even have to bring your Bible. We'll have it up on the big screens. And I have no problem with big screens. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when a preacher gets up, and let me say this, because when we went to East Somerset Baptist Church, Brother Darby he had big screens. He put the verses up there, remember, but he also put his outline up there. And so you would get to see what the verses said before and what the verses said after. And he would expound upon, as he pulled his points out, he would expound upon the verses that are up there. And there would be 8. So, again, I have nothing against big screens. What I do have a problem with is when you take big screens and you take this little bitty old verse and you stick it up there and you say, that's what it says. That may not be what it says. Because if I was to take that verse right there, everybody would be like, man, God looks at women like they're nothing. And he doesn't. As a matter of fact, this actually teaches the complete opposite. So it says, if a man sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. So what is the context of what he is talking about? Verse 8, if she please not her master, who hath betrothed her to himself. So if he is going to the authority from the father figure, now the father would have the authority. He would give the authority. They would work out a contractual agreement. That's how Joseph and Mary they had a contract. They had not been with one another yet, but they were in this betrothal. And this guy the dad is handing the authority over to this man that is either the master of this house, that is either going to marry this girl or is going to betroth her to his son. So it says, who hath betrothed her to himself, then shall he let her be redeemed. To sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power, seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he have betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. If he took him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these 3 unto her, then shall she go out free without money. So this is actually the complete opposite of what people would think. This is not we need to bring in women back down to size. This is literally safeguards in place for women to be treated fairly. And he says there in verse number 8, so if she please not her master, what does that mean? Oh, so she didn't do what he said. No, that's not what it's talking about at all. If the master looks at her and says, you know what, I'm just done with this. I don't want to marry her. Yeah, she just doesn't please me anymore. I just don't want to marry her. Well, Well, sorry, but you know what? You still got a responsibility to do. If she please not her master who hath betrothed her to himself, so he was going to marry her for himself, but no, I don't think so. Then shall he let her be redeemed. So somebody else can pay the dowry, and they can say, well, I'll marry her. I'll take her. And so to sell her unto a strange nation, he shall have no power. He can't take her and profit off of her and sell her to a Gentile nation. Seeing he hath dealt deceitfully with her. I was going to marry her. Now I decided, you know what? I'm not going to. I just don't feel like it now. She didn't cook the pancakes the way I like them. I like them crispy on the edges. But that's what he's saying. He said, I'm not pleased anymore. So I'm not going to go through with this. And the Bible says that he hath dealt deceitfully with her. And if he hath betrothed her unto his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of daughters. So if Brian's to get married and he is to bring a girl into the house, guess what? We are to treat her like she is our daughter. I feel like that we would feel that way anyways, unless she's just mean. But verse 10, if he take him another wife, so if he's like, you know what, and this is not God saying it's okay to have multiple wives, but sinful man makes sinful decisions, and you're going to have consequences for that. If he take him another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duty of marriage shall he not diminish. And if he do not these three unto her, then shall she go out free without money. So you're not going to take care of her. You made this contract. You have broken the contract. And we know today, you break contracts, you're going to end up in a court of law. You have made this contract to marry this woman. Now you have went against it. You've not let her been redeemed. You don't have the power to sell her to a strange nation. So here's what you got to do, bud. You made the decision. So you have to make sure that her needs are met, even if you're going to decide to marry somebody else. You say, how in the world is that fair? What about a divorce? Wasn't installed then. you made the decision. Handle the consequences. Anybody got anything? That's tough. This is tough stuff to talk about.